There is a strange silence surrounding sister wives right now. Not the kind of silence that means nothing is happening. The kind of silence that makes people start asking whether everything has already happened. For more than 15 years, viewers watched the Brown family build a life that seemed almost impossible to understand from the outside. 4 wives, 1 husband, children growing up under the same complicated family structure. Houses purchased, relationships tested, arguments captured, marriages transformed, dreams announced, and promises made. The premise was simple enough to explain in one sentence. But what unfolded on television became something much larger. It became a story about love, religion, power, jealousy, parenting, money, loyalty, identity, and ultimately what happens when a family built around togetherness slowly stops being a family in the way its audience originally understood it. And now, as questions surrounding Season 21 dominate the Sister Wives fandom, an uncomfortable possibility has begun to emerge. What if the problem isn't whether the show can continue? What if the real problem is that the story viewers originally tuned in to watch has already ended? TLC's own current description acknowledges the transformation. The Browns have left polygamy behind, and the family viewers once knew as one household is now living very different lives. The network's episode listings for Season 20 show just how far that transformation has gone. Cody and Robin are confronting monogamy. Mary is exploring dating. Janelle is rebuilding independently. Christine is married to David, and the once central Coyote Pass saga has finally reached its conclusion. That is not a small change. That is the collapse of the original premise. And yet the cameras keep finding a way to follow them. That is where the debate begins. Because for some viewers, Sister Wives is no longer a show about plural marriage. It is a show about what happens after plural marriage. For others, that distinction is exactly the reason they keep watching. And then there is a third group. The viewers who say they have simply had enough. Not because they suddenly hate the Browns. Not because they don't care what happens to them. But because they believe the emotional journey has reached its natural ending. That argument became particularly loud after Season 20, when fans watched Coyote Pass finally sell and Cody attempt a series of apologies to his former wives. TLC itself described the sale as the final chapter for the family, while later episodes followed Cody's efforts to make peace with Christine, Janelle, and Mary. And that wording matters. The final chapter. Because if Coyote Pass represented one of the last physical symbols of the Brown family's shared future, its sale carried a meaning that went far beyond real estate. The land was gone. The marriages were gone. The communal household was gone. The children had grown up. The wives had moved forward. And Cody was no longer trying to preserve the family structure that originally made the series unique. He was trying to understand what remained after it disappeared. That is a fascinating human story. But it is also a dangerous place for a television franchise to find itself. Because there comes a moment when a reality series has to answer a question that scripted television can postpone indefinitely. What is the story now? And that question is becoming impossible for Sister Wives to avoid. As of July 2026, reports indicated that cameras had rolled for Season 21 and that production had wrapped. But TLC had not publicly announced an official premiere date or released a conventional Season 21 announcement. That uncertainty has only intensified fan speculation. And while the network has remained relatively quiet, the fandom has not. Online discussions have become increasingly blunt. Some fans are asking what Season 21 could possibly be about. Others are saying the show should have ended already. And some have gone even further, arguing that continuing the series risks turning what was once an extraordinary family documentary into an endless loop of old conflicts, old grievances, and conversations that never truly change anything. One Reddit discussion from July captured that divide almost perfectly. Some viewers argued the franchise could continue for years with new formats and family-centered episodes. Others said the show had nowhere meaningful left to go because the marriages had ended and many of the children no longer wanted to participate. Another discussion earlier in 2026 was even more direct. One fan described the family as already finished and said the sale of Coyote Pass felt like the final remaining piece of the shared story disappearing. Others admitted they were still watching largely because they had followed the family for so many years, even though their interest had faded. And perhaps that is the most important clue of all. Not whether viewers are angry, whether they are emotionally exhausted, because anger keeps people watching. Indifference doesn't. For years, sister wives thrived on conflict because every conflict threatened something that still existed. A marriage could fall apart, but the family was still there. A wife could become distant, but the larger household remained. A child could rebel, but the family structure remained the central force pulling everyone back into the story. Even Coyote Pass, for all its frustrations, represented a future. There was always something being built. A house, a family, a marriage, a relationship, a new beginning. Now look at where everyone stands. Christine has built a new marriage and a new life with David. Janelle has been openly focused on rebuilding her own life. Mary has moved forward from her relationship with Cody and explored what comes next. Robin remains with Cody. And Cody himself has spent the later chapters of the series confronting the consequences of the collapse of the plural family. This isn't speculation about the broad direction of the story. It is the story TLC has been documenting. The network's Season 20 description explicitly framed the show around the Browns rebuilding their lives separately after multiple breakups. That phrase is crucial, separately. The word almost sounds like the opposite of the show's title. Sister Wives. The name promises connection. The current reality is separation. And perhaps that contradiction explains why Season 21 has become such a complicated question. Because there is a strange paradox at the center of the franchise. The more successful the original story became, the more difficult it became to preserve. Viewers watched the family grow. They watched the children become adults. They watched the marriages change. They watched the wives discover independence. They watched the family structure collapse. And now they are watching the aftermath. But aftermath stories have a natural limit. At some point, rebuilding becomes ordinary life. And ordinary life is not always television. This is where critics of the show make their strongest argument. They aren't necessarily saying Christine, Janelle, Mary, Robin, Cody, or their children have nothing interesting left to say. They are asking whether every interesting thing needs to be filmed. That distinction matters. A person can have a fascinating life without needing a camera following them through every chapter. And there is another uncomfortable question. When a reality show follows a family through years of trauma and conflict, how do you know when documenting the story stops being illuminating and starts becoming repetitive? That question has followed Sister Wives for years. But now the circumstances are different. Because the old conflicts have reached conclusions. Mary's relationship with Cody has ended. Janelle's relationship with Cody has ended. Christine's relationship with Cody has ended. Coyote Pass has been sold. And Season 20 even showed Cody attempting apologies to his former wives, with the later episodes revisiting the history of those relationships and the emotional consequences of their breakdown. So what happens when apologies become the storyline? Do they create closure? Or do they simply reopen wounds for another season? That is one of the central questions surrounding Season 21. Because viewers have already seen Cody attempt reconciliation. They have seen the meetings. They have heard the grievances. They have watched former wives question his sincerity. They have watched family members discuss the impact of his relationships with the children. And they have watched the same emotional history from multiple perspectives. Season 20 even included an episode in which Christine's husband, David, confronted Cody about his children during an apology meeting. Another episode centered on Cody's apology to Mary, where Mary questioned whether his remorse was sincere. Those scenes were powerful because they represented unfinished business. But unfinished business can only remain unfinished for so long before the audience starts asking whether the show is simply refusing to let the story end. And that is where the emotional divide becomes fascinating. Some viewers want closure. Others want consequences. Some want reconciliation. Others don't want reconciliation at all. And some simply want to see everyone move on. That last group may be larger than producers realize. Because there is something deeply satisfying about watching people survive a chapter and finally close the door. But television has a built-in problem with closure. Closure ends stories. And television needs stories to continue. That tension may be the real antagonist of Season 21. Not Cody. Not Christine. Not Mary. Not Janelle. Not Robin. The machine itself. The expectation that because viewers invested 15 years into these people, the cameras should keep rolling. But should they? Think about what made the original Sister Wives so compelling. The audience was being introduced to something unfamiliar. They were learning how a plural family operated. They were watching Cody navigate 4 relationships. They were watching the wives negotiate jealousy, affection, parenting, and identity. The show invited viewers to ask whether this unusual family arrangement could actually work. And for a while, the question was genuinely open. That uncertainty was television gold. Nobody knew what would happen. Would the wives stay together? Would the children embrace the lifestyle? Would the family build one shared home? Would the move to Las Vegas change them? Would the move to Flagstaff change them? Would Coyote Pass become the future? Would the marriages survive? Every season contained a question that could fundamentally alter the family. Now the biggest questions have already been answered. 3 marriages ended. The family structure changed permanently. The Browns are no longer functioning as the plural household the series originally introduced. And TLC itself now presents the family as having left polygamy behind. So perhaps the question isn't whether there is enough drama. There will always be drama. The question is whether there is enough meaningful story. That is harder. Reality television can manufacture circumstances, but it cannot manufacture genuine stakes forever. At some point, the audience recognizes the pattern. A conversation happens. Someone feels hurt. Someone explains their perspective. Someone disagrees. A family member says they need boundaries. Another says they want reconciliation. A tell-all arrives. Then another season begins. And suddenly viewers are asking themselves why they are still watching a conversation that feels like it already happened 3 times. This is the danger of repetition. And it is not unique to Sister Wives. Every long-running reality franchise eventually confronts it. The people don't necessarily become less interesting. The audience simply becomes more familiar with their patterns. The mystery disappears. The audience knows who is likely to react emotionally. They know who is likely to defend themselves. They know which subjects will create conflict. They know which relationships are broken. They know which conversations are unlikely to end with resolution. That familiarity can be comforting, but it can also become exhausting. And Season 21 is entering precisely that territory. The most revealing thing may be that fans aren't asking whether the family has changed. Everyone knows they have. They're asking whether the show has changed enough with them. That is a much harder question. Because if the series continues exactly as before, viewers may feel like they are watching an echo. But if producers radically change the format, they risk losing the identity that made the show successful. It is a television trap. Stay the same and become stale. Change too much and become unrecognizable. There is, however, one possible way out. Stop treating the show as a story about plural marriage. Stop pretending the old family structure still exists. And make the series honestly about what comes after. Because that story is actually enormous. The Brown children are adults. The former wives are living independent lives. Cody and Robin are navigating a completely different relationship dynamic than the one viewers first saw. Mary has entered a new phase. Janelle has been rebuilding. Christine has embraced a new marriage. And the family's relationships with one another are no longer governed by the same structure. TLC's Season 20 material already moved in this direction. The network described the season as an exploration of the Browns trying to rebuild their lives separately and move beyond the bitterness that defined the family's later years. That could be the future. But it would require something reality television does not always do well. Honesty without artificial escalation. Imagine a season where the goal isn't to force another confrontation. Imagine following these people through ordinary adulthood. Christine and David building their marriage. Janelle developing her new home and new chapter. Mary expanding her business and social life. Robin and Cody confronting what monogamy actually means after years of plural marriage. The adult children deciding which parts of their family history they want to carry forward. That could be quieter. But quieter doesn't necessarily mean boring. In fact, it could be the most emotionally powerful version of Sister Wives ever produced. Because the greatest transformation in the Brown family may no longer be happening inside a marriage. It may be happening inside individual people. And there is another reason this matters. For years, viewers were encouraged to think about the family collectively. The Browns, the wives, the children, the household, the family. But now the central emotional question is individual. Who are these people when they are no longer defined by the family structure that made them famous? That question has already begun to shape the show's narrative. Mary, for example, has been exploring dating and new relationships after ending her spiritual union with Cody. During the season 20 finale special, she discussed her connection with Ron, describing it as a friendship while acknowledging their chemistry. Janelle has been focused on rebuilding. Christine has moved into a new marriage. And Cody and Robin are facing the reality that they are now the only remaining married couple from the original four-wife structure. TLC itself asks whether their monogamy will last and even teases the possibility of another wife entering Cody's life. That single question reveals how much the premise has changed. Once, the question was how Cody could maintain multiple marriages. Now, the question is whether he will remain monogamous. That is not a minor evolution. It is almost an inversion of the original premise. And it may be precisely why the show still has life left in it. Because there is another side to the end the show argument. Sometimes a franchise doesn't need the original premise to survive. It needs a compelling transformation. The most successful long-running documentaries often become something different from what they started as. The Brown family could do the same. But there is a major obstacle. The audience. Because fans are not simply viewers anymore. They have memories. They remember old episodes. They remember conversations. They remember contradictions. They remember promises. They remember who said what years ago. And they compare the present to the past. That means every new season carries the weight of everything that came before it. A new argument isn't just a new argument. It is measured against 15 years of history. An apology isn't just an apology. It is compared with every previous apology. A new relationship isn't just a relationship. It is compared with the marriages viewers watched collapse. And that makes the show's emotional burden enormous. This is why season 21 could become either a surprisingly important chapter or the moment when viewers finally walk away. The difference will depend on whether the season gives them something genuinely new. Not simply new footage. New meaning. Because fans are not necessarily demanding more explosions. They may be demanding resolution. There is a huge difference. One asks, what happens next? The other asks, what did all of this mean? For a show that has lasted this long, the second question may actually be more important. What did 15 years of Sister Wives accomplish? Did the series normalize conversations about plural families? Did it expose the emotional inequalities that can exist inside complicated relationship structures? Did it give former wives a platform to redefine themselves? Did it allow children to speak about growing up in a family structure most Americans had never experienced personally? Did it simply turn private pain into entertainment? Or, as many fans now debate, did it somehow become all of those things at once? There is no simple answer. And perhaps that is why ending the show feels so emotionally complicated. Because ending Sister Wives would not simply mean canceling another reality program. For millions of viewers, it would mean saying goodbye to a family they have watched grow older. People who were children when the series began are adults now. Relationships that once seemed permanent are gone. Homes have been sold. Children have moved away. The family's geography has changed. The language they use to describe themselves has changed. Even the title has acquired a strange historical quality. Sister Wives once described a living structure. Now it describes the memory of one. And maybe that is why some viewers feel that the series should end. Not because the family failed, but because the story succeeded in reaching its natural conclusion. There is dignity in ending something before it becomes a parody of itself. But there is also danger in assuming that an ending is automatically better. Because viewers who have followed these people for years may still genuinely care. They may want to know what happens next. They may want to see the children become parents. They may want to see Christine's marriage evolve. They may want to see Janelle's next chapter. They may want to understand Mary's new life. They may want to know whether Cody and Robin can build a stable relationship after everything that happened. They may even want to know whether the family can ever become something resembling a functional extended family again. The question is whether those stories require an entire traditional season.